It's go time for Supreme Court nominee Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Will she get confirmed? Will the Democrats be able to get one or two or three more Republican senators to say, we're not so sure? You'll hear my predictions on The Durst Show. The Senate Judiciary Committee has begun hearings on the possible confirmation of President Trump's nomination of Judge Barrett to serve on the United States Supreme Court and take the seat that was previously held by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I watched the opening statements, and there were very few surprises. The Democrats began with Senator Feinstein, who may be the very reason why Judge Barrett was nominated. She badly mishandled Judge Barrett's nomination to the Seventh Circuit 3 years ago when she looked her in the eye and basically accused her of being too religious. She said that the dogma lives loudly within you and that is of concern. No. That's not of concern under the Constitution of the United States, which prohibits any religious test from being imposed on anybody serving or seeking to serve in any office under the United States. So it's out of bounds constitutionally to attack someone's religion as dogma or to express concern about a person's religion per se. And as the result of that statement being issued by Senator Feinstein when she was the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Judge Barrett leaped to the top of the list to be nominated for the Supreme Court. They made T-shirts out of Feinstein's statement, "The dogma lives loudly within you." People who are proud Catholics use that as a badge of courage, saying, yes, the dogma lives loudly within us. Don't call it dogma, perhaps, but it's our faith, our deep religious views. So they realized, the Democrats did, that Judge Feinstein's approach had absolutely backfired. And so I think they're going to stay away from asking questions about her faith, her religion, and they're certainly not going to use words like a dogma to describe her deep belief in the Catholic faith. They may ask her questions about an article she wrote back in, I think, 1998, actually quite a brilliant article, very good article, about when does a religious Catholic have an obligation to recuse herself or himself from sitting in cases where they could not apply the law without violating their faith. It's a fair question, and it's a question that I think will be put to her when the senators get around to asking questions. Right now, the senators are just making opening statements, and the Democratic strategy seems very clear to me. I'm not sure it's the best strategy, but it seems fairly clear. What they're going to focus on is the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Just a little background on that. The Supreme Court upheld Obamacare in a 5-4 vote with the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who I remember well from his days at Harvard Law School and is quite a brilliant and accomplished lawyer. He went out of his way to try to uphold the Affordable Care Act and may have stretched doctrine a little bit too much. He upheld the act as a tax, and under the Constitution, Congress has the power to impose taxes. Even President Obama said, "Oh, wait a minute, it's not a tax. I never intended it as a tax." And most scholars didn't see it as a tax. And Judge Barrett, when she was a law professor, wrote critically of that decision and said, no, you can't uphold the law based on it being a tax. That gives us a clue as to what she might rule if the case comes to the court, and it is coming to the court. In early November, just days after the election, the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear argument on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act brought by Republicans, a challenge brought by Republicans, and she may well be confirmed in time to sit on that. And if she does sit on it, and if she does cast the deciding vote now 5-4 against the Affordable Care Act, reversing Chief Justice Roberts' decision, it may result in health care being denied to vulnerable people, to people with pre-existing conditions, etc. So I think the strategy of the Democrats, and I'm sure they were advised to do this by their political commentators, is look, right now the vote is 51 to 49 in favor of confirmation. If you could just get two senators, two Republican senators, who are running for re-election in states where the Affordable Care Act is highly popular, and in which many people in the states would lose coverage if the Affordable Care Act were held unconstitutional. If you could just get two senators to say, maybe this is not the right nominee, maybe if I vote yes, it'll cost me my seat in the Senate, maybe we should vote no or abstain or focus on the fact that it's too late in the electoral process. Maybe we shouldn't vote for confirmation. That's the strategy of the Democrats. I don't think it's going to work. It may be the best the Democrats have, but it's unlikely to persuade two senators. Actually, all the Democrats may have to do is persuade one senator. This will sound surprising to some of my viewers and listeners, but if the vote were a 50-50 tie, everybody says, well, that's easy. The vice president gets to break a tie whenever there's a tie in the Senate. Not so fast. If you go back to the history of that provision of the Constitution, it clearly related to legislation. It clearly related to the idea that if you have a law and the vote is tied 50 to 50, the vice president, who is the president of the Senate, gets to cast the deciding vote. Does it operate for confirmation of a Supreme Court justice? There's no precedent for that. We've never confirmed a Supreme Court justice by a divided vote, with the deciding vote being cast by the Vice President of the United States. Some would argue that it would give the presidency too much power. The president gets to nominate, and then the president, through his vice president, who is his surrogate, gets to confirm. Did the framers intend for the president both to nominate and confirm their own person for the Supreme Court? There would at least be an argument the Democrats would have against the vice president casting the deciding vote. Who would they make that argument to? They'd have to make it to the United States Senate. The United States Senate is controlled by Republicans, so they probably lose that argument, but it would be at least some kind of a symbolic victory. The idea of having a person sit on the Supreme Court for 40 years. This woman is in her late 40s. She could serve, if she lives as long as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she could serve 40 years on the Supreme Court. The idea of having somebody serve on the Supreme Court for 40 years without a clear majority of the senators who were elected to the Senate requiring a tie-breaking vote by the vice president would cast some question on the legitimacy of her seat on the Supreme Court. Enough to defeat the nomination? Probably not. So the most likely scenario is that the Republicans are going to get their way. They're going to get away with the hypocrisy of having opposed the confirmation process of Merrick Garland just 4 years ago, less than 4 years ago, when he was nominated to replace Justice Scalia by then sitting President Barack Obama. The Republicans said, no, it's too late. It's 8 months before the election. Too late. And Senator Lindsey Graham said, use my words against me if I ever change my mind, and if I ever say that it's okay to confirm a senator a year or 6 months before the election. Well, now it's just weeks before the election, 3 weeks before the election. And Senator Graham and 50 other senators seem to be ready to violate a rule that they established only 4 years ago. Oh, they're coming up with all kinds of justifications. Now we control the Senate and the presidency, so it's different. No, that's not different. That's just difference in power. That's not difference in morality or difference in constitutionality. Look, let there be no mistake about it. The president had the power to nominate Judge Barrett. The Senate has the constitutional power to confirm her. The only issue is, should Republicans vote inconsistently with what they said 4 years ago? Is hypocrisy or inconsistency a value high enough to maybe influence some votes? Already two senators, Republican senators, said, yeah, we're not going to vote for confirmation because it's too late in the process. Will there be a third? Will there be a fourth? unlikely. I was frankly surprised that Senator Romney, who I remember he was my student at Harvard Law School and my governor when he was the governor of Massachusetts, and somebody I admire, I was surprised that he didn't raise some questions or doubts about the process of confirming a nominee so close to the election. But apparently he is going along with the majority of the Republicans. Remember, he's the only Republican who dissented when I argued the case in front of the United States Senate against impeaching President Trump. He was the only Republican who voted against my argument, having come over to me and praised me for the argument I made, but he disagreed with it. And he voted the other way. He voted to remove President Trump on one of the grounds of impeachment. If his views had prevailed, there would be no President Trump at this point in time, but his views didn't prevail. He was the only Republican. And he is known as a kind of dissenter, iconoclast, individualist. So I think a lot of Democrats were counting on him to slow down the process and perhaps not vote for confirmation, but he's indicated, at least at the moment, that he's inclined to vote for confirmation. So the hearings will go forward. Today, we're going to mostly hear from senators. They each have a few minutes to lay out their views. After that, Judge Barrett will lay out her views. We already know what they are. She has produced an advanced text. As you might imagine, there isn't a controversial word in anything she said. She talks about the rule of law and how she's following in the tradition of the great Justice Ginsburg and of the great Justice Scalia. Of course, you're not going to hear anything controversial. They are preparing her so carefully for these hearings. What they're doing, what they did in the past few days, and what they'll continue to do probably, is they have what's called a murder board. Sounds terrible. It sounds like the name for a TV mystery show. The Murder Board. The Murder Board is a handful of very smart Republicans who want to see her confirmed, but whose job it is to ask her the most difficult, most embarrassing, most inappropriate questions possible in order, A, to make sure she has the right substantive answers, and B, to make sure that she doesn't react emotionally the way, for example, Judge Kavanaugh reacted before he was confirmed as Justice Kavanaugh. Of course, there's a big difference. Judge Kavanaugh was accused, it seems likely falsely accused, at least by some of the accusers, of sexual misconduct that went back to when he was a teenager. And he was infuriated. I understand that. I've been falsely accused. I think I would have been infuriated too if I had been asked about something that never happened. But he was very, very angry, and some people think he didn't help his cause. Going back many, many years, Judge Bork was not confirmed for the Supreme Court because he didn't handle the hearings as effectively as he might have. So they're going to prepare her effectively. She is going to answer every belligerent question with a smile. She will talk about her faith in a very serious manner. She'll talk about her children, her biological children, her adopted children. She'll talk about her judicial philosophy. She won't get excited. She won't be emotional. She'll present herself very effectively. Maybe she'll say she changed her mind since she wrote that article about recusal. Maybe she'll say that she was only the junior author. The senior author really was the one who came up with the idea of recusal, and maybe she's changed her mind. Maybe she won't. Maybe she'll say, no, I'm sticking with it, and I will recuse myself from a certain number of cases, and then they'll ask her what the criteria are for recusal. Probably she'll try to avoid getting into that rabbit hole because there's really no way out of it. Once you start saying you're going to recuse yourself, it's easy to come up with case after case after case where you might have to recuse yourself. Of course, one of the questions she might be asked is, will you recuse yourself if the president who nominated you has a case in the Supreme Court and is a litigant, and yours would be the fifth vote in a 5-4 decision? Would you feel comfortable casting the deciding vote in favor of the president who nominated you? I think she'll say yes to that she would sit on that case. Would it help her case? Not help her case? Probably it won't hurt her case. So this is a very important couple of weeks in American history. People are surprised to know that until about 100 years ago, justices didn't appear at confirmation hearings. Justice Brandeis, who was very controversial because he was the first Jew nominated to the Supreme Court, and his nomination was opposed on the ground that he was Jewish, all in violation of the United States Constitution. But he didn't appear at the confirmation hearings and testify, as that was the tradition of the day. I think he answered some questions in writing. But since that time, nominees have appeared in person. And as you know, there have been some very contentious hearings. The Bork hearing resulted in the creation of a new word in our language, to be borked. To be borked. His name has become a verb as the result of the hard questions that he was asked. Justice Thomas asked about sexual harassment allegations made by a former employee. Justice Kavanaugh asked about his sexual activities as a teenager, and we've had others as well. So generally, the confirmation process has become much more contentious and much more partisan. I don't think we're going to see the contentiousness in the next 2 weeks. I think we'll see partisanship on both sides, but I don't think we'll see contentiousness, because she is the kind of candidate who will be able to turn that to her advantage. So stay tuned. It's an important historical time. This process of confirming Judge Barrett could change America for many years. If there is a 6-3 conservative majority, even if you discount Chief Justice Roberts, who tries to be a peacemaker, it still would be a fairly firm 5-4 majority for conservative positions. And most of the conservative justices, with the exception of Justice Thomas, are quite young and could serve on the Supreme Court for a long time, which of course gives rise to what some Democrats are saying, another controversial issue, which will come up probably in this process. And that is, if the Democrats lose this, if Judge Barrett is confirmed, as she likely will be, will the Democrats take revenge if they take over the White House, take over the Senate, and retain control of the House of Representatives? Will they pack the court? Constitutionally, it's very easy to do. All you need is a majority vote of both houses and a non-veto by the president. And you could raise the number to 11, thereby giving the Democrats 2 new vacancies to fill, or 13, giving them 4, or 15. An op-ed in the New York Times said, what's wrong with having 37 justices of the Supreme Court? Well, there's plenty wrong with that. It turns the Supreme Court into a political institution rather than a judicial institution. 9 is about the right number. We've had it now for close to 150 years. It's not in the Constitution, but it's part of our tradition. Both presidential candidate Biden and vice presidential candidate Harris have refused to respond to direct questions. Would you advocate, support court packing? For them, it's a no-win proposition. If they say they would not, they would lose OAC and the radicals on the left who want court packing. If they say yes, they would pack the court. They would lose some centrists and moderates who don't believe you should pack the court. Franklin Delano Roosevelt tried it and lost a lot of support when he did. So they have been refusing to answer the question. Do they have a right? Of course they have a right. Is it right to refuse to answer a question like that? I don't think so. I think running for president means you really have to answer those kinds of questions. Look, the vice president also refused to answer questions about what he would do if the president refused to leave office after losing the election. So both sides have refused to answer relevant questions. But for purposes of the confirmation hearing, the shadow of court packing lurks in the background. And so what may end up happening is a short-term victory for the Republicans. They get their Justice Barrett, but in the end they lose their majority as the result of court packing. That would be, I think, unfortunate for the Supreme Court, unfortunately for America, unfortunately for our constitutional rule of law, but it could happen. So an important couple of weeks coming up, probably will end with a vote before the election, probably will end with a confirmation of the nominee. But, you know, in the world we live in, nothing is certain. If you had asked any of us a year ago to predict what the world would look like today with the coronavirus, with the racial protests in the street, with the election as it's being conducted. I don't think anybody could have predicted what the outcome would be. The Talmud, the Jewish Talmud, says that prophecy ended with the destruction of the Second Temple. And anybody who tries to prophesy the future is either a fool or a knave or a pollster. And pollsters sometimes end up being fools and knaves, as they were certainly fools in the run up to the 2016 election. So, although I'm predicting here today that we'll probably see the confirmation hearings go forward, probably see the confirmation of Judge Barrett, and maybe see some Democratic revenge if they take over the Senate, the House, and the presidency with court packing, don't put it in the bank. Yes, I've made some pretty accurate predictions in the past. I accurately predicted the likelihood that President Trump would beat Hillary Clinton back in 2016. I predicted Brexit, but don't count on my predictions. The world we live in has become so unpredictable. So, if you want to know what happened, you're going to have to tune in to the Durst Show. See if my predictions have come true. I promised you I'd never bore you. Now it's time for your voice to be heard. Judy from New York.
Yes, Professor Dershowitz. My name is Judy Ann Joyner, and I live in Suffolk County on Long Island. And I'd like to thank you for speaking out about the anti-Semitism in the Democrat Party. It is horrific. You know, it was only a week or so ago I sat down and looked through a whole accounting of my family tree that came here from Austria, at how many of them perished. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. No, any good-minded person could not possibly remain attached to the Democrat Party. I'm sorry. Can't do it. Thank you, sir.
Well, this is one person who remains attached to the Democratic Party. I'm going to stay a Democrat as long as I can have some influence on trying to marginalize the anti-Semites, and there are anti-Semites in the Democratic Party. Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite. I have absolutely no doubt about that. And other members of the squad are anti-Zionist and sometimes cross the line into anti-Semitism. When AOC refused to go to a memorial for Yitzhak Rabin, the great prime minister of Israel, who was assassinated because he wanted peace, that crossed the line. Why would you refuse to attend a memorial for the prime minister of the only nation state of the Jewish people? When you discriminate against the only nation state of the Jewish people, that crosses the line to anti-Semitism. I'm going to fight against anti-Semitism with every bit of power I have, but I'm going to remain a Democrat because I want to see support for Israel, support for Jewish values, remain bipartisan. And I don't want to see the Republicans become the party of pro-Israel, the Democrats become the party of anti-Israel. That's become true in England, where the Labour Party has turned virulently against Israel and the Conservative Party more or less in favor of Israel. I don't think we want to see that in the United States. I think bipartisan support for Israel and Jewish values is too important. So I'm remaining a Democrat, and I'm remaining a Democrat as long as I can continue to have some influence in marginalizing the most radical elements of the Democratic Party. Hey, Harvey, you're from Nevada. What do you have to say?
If the Democrats hold the House, Biden wins the White House, and the Democrats take the Senate, what's required to expand the Supreme Court from 9 to 15 judges? Is it just a simple majority in the Senate that's required? And if the Republicans get Barrett confirmed, is there any doubt in your mind that if the Democrats do sweep all three branches, that they will, in fact, try to expand the Supreme Court to 15 judges? Thank you, and have a great day. Bye.
Great question. It does take only a simple majority of the Senate and the House and a non-veto by the president. It's just a bill, just like any other law. Just expand the number. The Constitution doesn't have a number of Supreme Court justices. It's been 5, it's been 7, it's been 9. It's never been more than 9, and it hasn't been anything but 9 for the last 150 or so years. So it's very easy to do. Will they do it? Would a President Biden, if he were to be elected, veto such a bill? I suspect he would, but I'm not sure. There'd be a lot of pressure on him not to do it and to allow it to go through. Remember that the very popular President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and a President Biden wouldn't have nearly the popular support that a President Roosevelt had in his the second term as president, end of the Depression, the New Deal. He tried to pack the court to eliminate the 9 old men who were striking down New Deal legislation regularly, and he was rebuffed by his own party. And they said, no, the tradition of 9 is too important. So there'd be tremendous pressure within the Democratic Party to expand the court, to preserve a woman's right to choose, to preserve health care, to preserve a range of other issues that are important. But I don't think in the end it would succeed, because it would open up a process that the next time the Republicans get control of the 3 branches of government, they would expand the court from 11 to 13 to 15 to 17, you name it. So I think politicians are not known for taking the long view. They look at, will it benefit me and my party today and tomorrow? But I suspect when it came to court packing, at least a President Biden were to be elected, would take a somewhat longer view. Hey, Bago from LA, what's your point?
Hello, Mr. Dershowitz. Hope you are doing well. My name is Vago Chobanian. I am a Los Angeles resident. I'm calling in reference to your input regarding the current ethnic cleansing war that's going on in the Caucasus, where Azerbaijan, backed by Turkey, is pretty much driving out the Armenians, Christians from their ancestral lands and destroying their old churches and old synagogues, stuff old churches, that's what I mean. So I wanted to find out what you feel about this. It's another horrific genocide that's going to take place, that took place 100 years ago. And wanted to have your input and talk about this issue to inform your audience. I've been listening to you for many years. I've lived in the United States for more than 45 years, and a true believer of this nation and what it could do to stand up against aggression, what is uncalled for. Please, I really would appreciate you talking about this subject and let your audience know what is going on, and to be more awake so that the Third World War would not start. This has to stop now before it's too late. Thank you so much. We appreciate all your efforts, whatever you can do to help us out.
Well, thank you for your heartfelt and very serious call. Look, we know that the first major genocide of the 20th century was committed against the Armenian people, the Armenian Christians, by Turkish Muslims. Whether it was the first religious war of the 20th century or the first kind of act of terrorism, for years people refused to recognize the Armenian genocide as a genocide. I was among the first to call for the United States, all the other countries in the world, to recognize the Armenian genocide for what it was. It was an attempt to ethnically cleanse areas of Turkey, then under the control of Turkey, during the World War I period, of Armenian Christians. Every excuse was made that no, it wasn't a genocide, it was really self-defense. Historians have now concluded there's no doubt that there was a policy of the Turkish government to slaughter Armenian children, women, to do everything in their power to rid the areas of ethnic Armenians, and it was a disaster. Hitler cited it when he called for the genocide of the Jews. He said, who remembers the Armenian genocide? Nobody. The old notion, if you kill one person, you're a murderer. If you kill 6 million, you're a politician. Whether it be the 6 million Jews who were killed or the many, many hundreds of thousands of Armenians who were killed. And if we're beginning to see anything like that today, it has to stop. It's extraordinarily complicated when you have areas that are under the political control of one country, but ethnically have many people from another country. We've seen that throughout history. We saw it in the former Czechoslovakia, where you had areas of ethnic Germans, and it gave Hitler an excuse to march on Czechoslovakia. We saw it with Russia and the Ukrainian effort to try to take over areas of the Ukraine or the Crimea. And now we're seeing it again. I have to admit, I am not a student, a careful student of what's going on. All I can say in response to your heartfelt plea is, please, all Americans, pay attention. And if there is going to be any ethnic cleansing or potential genocide, we have an obligation not to remain silent in the face of atrocities, in the face of injustices. So you've alerted me to this. I'm going to study this now more carefully than I've studied it before in appreciation of your call, and perhaps we can talk about this again in a subsequent program on The Der Show. The next call is from Baduyapin in Texas. What's your point?
Hello, Mr. Dershowitz. My name is Abudayappan from Texas. My question today is regarding the democratic form of government, wherein one person gets one vote. In this system, one of the main problems is vote block politics. In history, have there been other types of representation that have served better? I think so. I think just like all ideas are unequal, all votes are unequal too. I believe a voter should have weightage attached to his vote, depending on his qualifications and merit. As they gain education, qualifications, and merit in society, their voter weightage increases, and they can be black, brown, white, or any color. Think about it. Do you think someone with a grade 5 education can understand the ramifications of economic or foreign policy? Also, if you look closely at the colonial charters, they do claim to be rights of Englishmen. So in a way, that was a weighted form of representation too. Finally, in my system, there would be no voter blocks, as everyone would strive to improve their situation to get more representation, even though they have only one vote, and most importantly, cannot be swayed by populist ideas. Is this something you have taught or anybody has brought up? I just want to know what your thoughts were. Thank you.
Very, very interesting question. When I used to teach a freshman seminar at Harvard College, Where Does Your Morality Come From?, I would sometimes get into issues like this and would quote Thomas Jefferson, who said, given the education of a philosopher or a plowman, a person who works the ground, he said, I would prefer the views of the plowman over the philosopher in many instances. The democracy is not about who has the best intellectual capacity. It's about treating everybody equally. Yeah, the person with the 5th grade education gets treated equally. I remember my grandmother, when I was a law student, my grandmother would come and ask me who to vote for. My grandmother didn't go to school. She came over from Poland at 15 and was not educated. But I knew what her values were, and she knew what her values were, and who would best support her values. Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others that have been tried over time. And that's my view as well. So I would respectfully not agree with weighted votes based on education, particularly since our education systems today are not particularly fair. Education is more available to people of wealth than to people of poverty. I was lucky. I grew up in New York City. My family didn't have a lot of money, and they couldn't afford to send me to a paying college. But in New York City, we had Brooklyn College and City College and Hunter College and Queens College. They were free colleges. If you got in, and I barely got in by the skin of my teeth, you could go there for free. And I went to college for 4 years, got a phenomenal education, the equivalent of a Harvard, Yale, Princeton education, for free, for nothing. And that allowed me to become what I am. But if I had grown up in a state that didn't have free education, I would not get the votes that you would accord somebody with a college education, and that wouldn't be fair. I understand the frustration of populism and the dangers of populism, but let's remember too that the Nazis came to power in Germany not as the result of people with fifth grade education, but as the result of people with PhDs, people like Heidegger, the great philosopher, people like Gertrude Stein, a Jewish woman who supported Adolf Hitler, nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and wrote introductions to books by Nazis. People like Ezra Pound, the great poet who supported Nazism and fascism. So there's no correlation between education and the kind of populism that results in the election of dictators. So respectfully, I'm sticking with one person, one vote. I want to expand voting. I want to make sure everybody with a first grade education, second grade education, or PhD gets the same weight in voting. Look, we don't have a pure democracy. A vote for the Senate in California is much less powerful than a vote for the Senate in Wyoming. Wyoming has 2 senators. They have very few people. California, which is bigger than most countries in the world, has only 2 senators. That's not pure democracy. It was a compromise with democracy. But, under the original Constitution, senators weren't even elected by the popular vote. They were elected by the state legislatures. We've changed that. We've moved more from a republic to a democracy, but not a perfect democracy. It's a work in progress. Hope we'll move to an even greater democracy with everybody voting. But thanks for your really, really interesting call. We live in an age of hyper-partisan division, not on the Der Show. On this show, you're going to get nonpartisan, objective analysis. If you don't like it, there are plenty of cable shows where you can get your partisan fix for the day. But here, you're going to get analysis, nonpartisan analysis. I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I'm going to help you decide how to think. And we're going to be thinking about the confirmation process and other political issues in the run-up to the next presidential election. So please stay tuned to The Der Show. Remember, we'll take your calls 24/7, anytime, day or night. Make your call, and I will respond on The Der Show. Call our listener line at 216-710-0050. I want to hear your questions, your comments, your criticisms, and your opinions. Remember, all calls are recorded, and we reserve the right to use your questions and comments on the air. Once again, the listener line is 216-710-0050. I look forward to hearing from you. The Der Show is available on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts.